to meet the composers and songwriters behind your favorite TV shows? We have a whole TV composer party here for our next discussion. Let's welcome Amanda Jones, Amritha Vaz, Drum and Lace, Ian Hultquist, and Torrin Borrowdale, along with composer, ASCAP board member, and executive director of Sona, Michelle Lewis, to moderate. So let's get this party started.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us this lovely Thursday afternoon. We are live here at the ASCAP Experience with some amazing, talented composers. I'll go, I'm sure everybody's order that we're seeing you in is going to be different, so I'm just going to go in order of first name. Alphabetically, Amanda Jones, who has done Apple TV's Home, BET's 20s, and HBO's Black Lady Sketch Show. Amritha Vaz, who's done Apple TV's Home, Disney Junior's Mirror Royal Detective. Ian Hultquist, Apple TV's Dickinson, NBC's Good Girls, Netflix, How to Fix a Drug Scandal. Drum and Lace, Apple TV's Dickinson, and NBC's Good Girls. They are actually together in a box right there. And Torrin Borrowdale, who does the music for Lock and Key on Netflix. Welcome, everyone. It's so exciting to have you all here together. This is a very timely panel, I think, given the world we're in now. One of the things I see, we keep hearing about is like we're in a content boom, or we were hearing about that we were in a content boom, which creates a lot of like noise. And so how do you've all sort of had your breakthroughs within that past 3-year period. We're going to try and find the through line with this conversation of like how you managed to break through that noise. What did you sort of, what are your personal experiences with sort of breaking through the usual suspects, that always get called to, same people that get called to do shows for the same showrunners and things like that. So we're going to talk about that. And then also how we're sort of all adapting to this new normal, and kind of keeping it going with it in this completely unusual weirdo context that we're in right now. So I'm going to start with Amanda. It's definitely proving to be another banner year for Black storytelling, for Black female storytelling, and you've scored a lot of these projects. At Sundance, you helped premiere Lena Waithe's new series 20s, as well as the short film Baldwin Beauty. You've also been involved in Ava DuVernay's Cherish the Day, and of course, my favorite, Black Lady Sketch Show, among others on HBO. So how does it feel to be working with the showrunners and directors who have that level of celebrity? Did you feel like the pressure? Was it like high stakes? Like how did you deal?
Yeah, there was like so much that happened so quickly. And yeah, there's definitely kind of like that realization moment, the type of talent I'm working with. It's like so incredible, and it's just like, kind of bizarre to experience it so quickly. But I think just applying all the same methods of just like doing great work, just kind of putting the blinders on and just, putting your head down and just like churning it out and just being the best that you can possibly be, just being as creative as you possibly can be. And then, like a couple weeks later, it's like, oh, I'm on the other side of this thing that felt like such a hurdle initially. And now it's like, oh, and now it's almost over. I'm like, I've made it through this, milestone in my life. And you kind of just keep doing that, and you have like a rhythm that goes along with it. So, I mean, yeah, interfacing with a lot of people or with, creatives of that, level of celebrities, you say, it's definitely surreal, but just kind of keeping my head down and just working through it was like the way to get through it and kind of celebrate it later.
Right. So like, what was their availability like? Did you have to like make an appointment to make an appointment? Like, did you?
They were very just, part of the, like integrated into the creative process. So I was definitely grateful to work with them on on the first few shows. They were very much available. I mean, there's a lot of, guesswork involved. I guess that comes along with expertise, where it's like, okay, I can't keep going to this person to ask a million questions. So that's where your expertise comes in to like kind of make these big decisions,
Right.
to kind of do the right thing as like the head of your department, So, but yeah, I mean, you just do the best you can.
Seriously.
You hope for the best.
like being thrown into the fire, really, and then you just have to do the
Yeah,
job.
it was a little bit challenging at first, just being kind of like a little bit like shy, and really learning how to like speak up and just kind of like state these creative ideas that I have, and just be present and just be there and not like daydream too much to the fact that I'm like working with these really cool people. Just be like, okay, I'm here in this space. Here we go. Here's all my ideas. I have like a few minutes to share them, and then it's like on to the next thing, on to the next cue.
And were these projects like overlapping? Did you?
Let me see for a second. So I did the pilot for 20s first, and then it took some time for it to get picked up, and then I did the full series of a Black Lady sketch show. And then
Wow.
once that completed, it was kind of like beautifully um choreographed almost. And then once like a Black Lady sketch show finished, then I did the full season of 20s. And then right when that ended, it was like the full season of Cherish the Day. And then in between that, there was Home for Apple TV. We did an episode of Home. Yeah, it was kind of crazy and just kind of magical that the schedule just kind of worked out. Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing because time management has never been one of my skill sets. So when I do have overlapping projects, I tend to panic and completely freeze. So it's really lucky to get
Yeah.
to do it that way. So actually, and Amrita, since you work on an animated show, the timeline, I'm very familiar with the timeline for animation. It's more like 52 episodes a season rather than 26, right? It's insane in terms of the bulk. And while we're speaking about animation, I just want to acknowledge the demographic shift that we've had in our one of the boxes there. We have your demographic.
Yeah. Nap time didn't last as long as we were hoping it would.
Yes.
We love to see a baby. So tell me, like, I know that Mira Royal Detective premiered during lockdown.
Yes.
Right after lockdown. I remember I'm friends with the two songwriters, with Matt and Jeannie, and
Yeah.
I was very aware of the timing of this. How did you? Well, first let's talk. How did you first get involved with the show?
So, I think I have to, first of all, give huge credit to Disney for, making this show so authentic. I think that was really important for them. All the voice cast are South Asian, which now looking at some of the, movement, it seems like they were really ahead of the curve of really recognizing how important that was. And I think for the music, they really wanted someone who had that sort of similar authenticity and commitment and connection to, to the music. Now, the other side of that is I'd say a lot of people of color, a lot of women, a lot of people who, don't have access, I never had any experience in animation. So they took a big leap of faith with me. And that, I'm sure they were a little nervous. It was a bit of a risk. But, they did the thing that I think a lot of times we see so often with people who are not women, who are not people of color. People take a leap of faith. And we do that all the time. We look at your track record, they look at who you are. And so somehow they trusted that, and we went forward, and it was a process. I competed, I demoed, and I did the whole thing to try and get the job. And was very lucky to get hired. And Jeannie and Matt, who are incredible songwriters for the show, they had already, been working on a body of songs. So I got to listen to kind of that as part of, informing the voice of the show. But yeah, that's how I got started at J at Disney TVA. And and then I worked with Sasha, the showrunner, to help discover this voice of the show.
And how long would you say it took to get the palette? Like, what was that process like?
Oh my God. It was, what's really amazing about this character, Mira, and her friends, there's this intimacy, there's this friendship. And, when we think of Disney, it's usually very, big sound, big, beautiful orchestrations. And Sasha, I could just sense that he really wanted to emphasize this familiarity and this intimacy of this group, and which was perfect for me because my focus is chamber music. I love small, settings. That's more what I'm comfortable with. Things that are intimate, things that are a little raw, which I know saying the word raw and Disney, it doesn't feel like it would aesthetically work. But where I can, and what's also been really important is recording live instruments. So I have my team of amazing musicians who work on the show, and so we make sure to record them pretty much as many episodes as we can. But that rawness, that beautiful texture of real musicians playing on the show for various solos and various moments where we can sneak them in, I think really helped, create this sound we were looking for, something that was more nuanced and complex. And I think that was what was so great. I was a little nervous working on the show because I was like, well, this is a huge responsibility as a South Asian to write music for a show that's going to have this much exposure for the community. I both wanted to do my best just for me, but I wanted to do my best to represent the show to everybody in the world. This is the culture that I love so much and care about. But I really feel like we kind of found this melding of Western and pop and hip hop and just everything together to create this little sound for the show.
I mean, one of the through lines I'm getting from both of you is that the relationship with the executives and the showrunners that you develop over the course of the project, and how you learn to speak. I don't want to say learn to speak executive, but you kind of have to learn to translate their needs to a musical palette, and that's one of the, I think, as a composer, that's such a key just skill set to develop, so I wonder, turning to Ian and Sophia, how do those conversations work with you, collaboratively as a couple working together? When do you sort of have division of labor in terms of who deals with the network and who deals and do you both do it?
No, it's an open table for both of us. I think if we get hired on a project together, we want to make sure that we're both equally represented and equally involved. So we're both fully involved in every conversation with, whether it be the music supervisor or the music editor or the showrunner. We both want to make sure that our voices are there because that's what they asked for.
Yeah, and I think that then also translates as far as also the composition process and just kind of everything, rather than, because we know that there's a lot of other composer teams that tend to kind of be okay, you take this half of the episode and you take this half, whereas for us it's worked out better that we just do everything at the same time together. So there's never a cue that only Ian's worked on or only I've worked on. There's a chance that maybe one of us started it before the other got into the studio, but there's never a time that we print stems and we haven't both kind of contributed to it. So it feels very just equal, collaborative and equal. And I think that it's nice that there's two of us because you get rid of a lot of the self-doubt, because if you're oh, I don't know how this is, you immediately have somebody that can be no, this is great, or no, this is garbage, which also happens often. It's no, I don't like that. And it's nice to be able to have the transparency of being no, Ian, that doesn't work, for example.
Yeah.
So
Well, and actually it's interesting, that is one of the main things between being a composer and being a songwriter. Songwriters collaborate all the time. Collaborating as a composer is much more unusual. So, but I guess that you're a couple, you clearly have the shorthand of each other's, taste, and so is there sort of I'm just, this is my own curiosity, do you have oh, that's definitely a Sophia cue, or that's definitely an Ian cue? Do you have things that you're each drawn to?
Yeah, I think depending on which project it is, we know each other's strengths musically and where we can really kind of run with an idea. So as we're coming across cues, I think if either of us see something that's oh, you know how to do that in 5 seconds, then we let the other person take charge and kind of trade off.
yeah, and I think just musically, our individual projects, we have different sounds in a way. We like to listen to different music. We produce different music.
So I think that like when it comes together is like when it seems to be working for the TV shows that we're working on. But Ian tends to be more really good at kind of like adding in. Sorry, she just really wants to talk too. Ian, are you okay?
He has an opinion too.
Yes, she's heard a lot of the music that we've worked
You
on.
want to see the screen?
There you go. But I feel like Ian's really good at like the producing aspect and at bringing in kind of like orchestral instruments and making things sound bigger. Whereas I feel like for me, it's usually like the percussive, weird sample stuff that that kind of gets peppered in. So and vocals.
Drum and lace. I love that you're called Drum and Lace. It's very evocative of what you do. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
And Torrin, let's talk a little bit about Lock and Key. It's a very popular comic series, and in fact, when it was first introduced, the series sold out the first day, which is amazing, forcing an immediate second pressing. Were you already familiar with the show or with the comic book series before beginning to score it?
No, I wasn't really familiar with the project at all, and I do have a confession to make. I haven't read the comics even now, and yeah, I know. But it was kind of on purpose because sometimes there's things that happen in the original comic books that don't make it into the show that I really didn't want to get confused by things that really weren't going to happen in the version that I was scoring. So I kind of wanted to keep it separate, and I think the other reason that it kind of worked out really well was like when I read the scripts, I was really excited about this story, and like this was a new thing that I was just learning about. So I think kind of my enthusiasm for this new world that I was being introduced to kind of made its way into the score. So like with the main titles, I just wanted to write like a really fun version of like rediscovering magic, and this was kind of an opportunity to build the sound of the show from the ground up, and write a structure that I would be really proud of and that would make sense for the show. So I think this is like the first time that not doing my homework kind of paid off.
That's funny because the show, I guess the series has more of like a horror element originally, and like I think the new iteration is more comedic. Is that the thing?
It's a little more fantasy. It's a little more lighthearted, but I mean, when you get into it, like the last 5 episodes are definitely dark, and I was really again trying to make sure that I wasn't making the show darker than it actually was. And one thing I drew from the comics was kind of like this rich mythology of the world. I wanted to do kind of a classic orchestral cinematic score. And it just kind of turned out a little bit lighter than previous versions. And like one instance was, they do temp music for scenes when they're trying to figure out the tone. And there's one scene with the music box, which is kind of used to control people, kind of like a voodoo doll. And the music that they tempt was kind of sinister and dark and really creepy. And I realized that it didn't really work. Like it needed to be a little more comedic. It was more lighthearted. Like they used the music box to get revenge on a school bully. So like kind of the absurdity needed to be there. And that was a fun scene to do because the music box is in the world, and I got to write a little theme for that. And then when it kind of gets bigger than that and the magic gets used, the underscore comes in. So it was fun to do kind of both of those together.
That's so cool. I'm gonna come back to that. I feel like that leads to another thing. But I want to go back to Amanda just to talk about sort of, I want to shift this over to the sort of entry point into this world of what we're all doing now. You have an interesting background. You acted? Did you? And you were,
I don't think so.
I don't know. What did you?
Another Amanda.
Wait, no, sorry. You
I pretended to be a composer at first, and then they were like, "Oh,
you were
I'm just kidding."
creative. You were creative at Lionsgate. You were
Yeah.
You were an executive.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. No. So I worked at the studio level for 2 years, and kind of was an A&R person and like staffing shows, like hiring composers, music supervisors, music editors. And that was an incredible experience. And prior to that, I worked as a music production assistant at a couple different studios with Michael Levine and John Powell, and I did like the remote control thing for a little bit. And yeah, so it was great to experience both spaces, and kind of like gather this really comprehensive view of like the inception of the cue and creating it and delivering it and that side of it, and then also kind of like the hiring process and interfacing with like producers, directors, executives, and managing those expectations. So yeah, it was an incredible experience, kind of
And I could
understand
see that
both
that would
sides
be
of it to
that
kind
would
of like
be
launch from
amazing.
that.
Right, that would be an amazing background to sort of get to, to the place where you are, where you're actually, scoring the shows. You sort of,
Yeah.
that is kind of coming in, speaking the language of what executives are expecting and things like that. That's really important. At what point did you decide, like, or what point did you were like, oh, I'm going to switch?
Yeah, I mean, I was always very transparent about, my intentions and my goals. And so Russell Zeker, the television music head there at Lionsgate, and he was just like very supportive. And so when the opportunity came along for my first feature film in 2018, I was like, I have to do this. This is amazing. And he was like, go for it. And yes, I've just been kind of, freelance, like full-time lead composer like since then. And so it was like just the perfect moment. You kind of like wait for that moment. It was like, okay, this is the thing that'll let me go.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And Amritha, your grandfather was a composer or a musician? Oh wait, you're muted. Mhm.
Sorry about that. My grandfather was a drummer, incredible drummer in Bollywood. My uncle is still a drummer, and his son is a drummer. Really makes me feel like I should have played drums. But yeah, incredible lineage. My whole mom's family is super musical.
So did that kind of, I mean, do you feel like you were sort of like fated to be in music, or did you have a moment where you're like, that's what everybody else in the family does?
No, not at all. It's funny. I think when I was little, I wanted to be a musician. I was a I did all the Western classical route. I was a violinist and pianist. Developed very bad tendonitis at 16, and my my path sort of changed from there. And I thought that was sort of the end of my music career. But it's funny. Like my parents were very supportive in that they got me all these lessons. But I would say this, I think immigrant communities probably around the world have that same story of children, they don't necessarily want them to go off and be poor, struggling artist, musician. And so I think my dad, surprisingly, who was always considering music like a hobby, encouraged me to go to India to study Indian classical music to see if that would help my tendonitis. And it was great training, and it taught me to improvise. And I kind of didn't realize that it would come in so much handier later in life. But because I, was starting Indian classical music so late, and I kind of thought, I still have this tendonitis. Maybe I'll just continue to enjoy this music, but go off and do my own thing. And I did social justice. So I became a lawyer, and got a bunch of degrees, and really thought that my world was going to be post-conflict, law. And then it's like the most twisted journey ever. And then here I am now, bumping into Michael Dana in Canada, starting a new career in music and becoming a composer. So it was never an obvious thing. Becoming a composer was the last thing I imagined would ever happen to me at 16. I thought that was, that's it, it's over. So yeah, it just goes to show you this path is very strange and has its own unique story for everyone. Like, I think there are definitely people who go to school and study it and, become a composer, and it's just a very, straightforward route. But like Amanda, I kind of found my own sort of way into composing.
And was there like a sort of a tipping point for it? I mean, did you have like specifically with Mira, like what was the entry? What was the foot in the door with Mira?
Was the foot in the door?
Yeah, of getting of that job.
I think there was a bunch of things that came together. I think getting into Sundance was such a huge thing for me. I would recommend everyone to try and get in if you haven't. It's an incredible experience. And I think if nothing else, first of all, you get to meet these incredible mentors, but it really gave me some confidence that I had maybe a voice that was worth that was unique, or that maybe was what should be heard. I don't think I really had that confidence. I think I still struggle with that. I'm just constantly focusing on the work, getting the job done. But believing, having other people who you admire tell you that, hey, you've got something. You should really pursue this. It was huge to me. And like a lot of other people, I didn't see a lot of women or people of color, certainly not a lot of South Asians, pursuing composing. So I didn't really, see that out there as much. You see it a lot more now, which is great. But I think I just needed that confidence boost. So getting into the door of Disney TVA, I think part of it was also, people around me. I had really kind people saying, hey, there's a show coming around. You should apply, you should try. And honestly, one of the things I struggled with this show is I wondered about that fear of pigeonholing. Because I'm South Asian and I'm doing music for a South Asian show, will people only think that that's my limited range? Will they give me the benefit that they give so many other composers, which is just, oh yeah, they could do that. Maybe they'll constantly just say, oh, she can only do this small little thing, which is still an amazing thing to do. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But will they see the potential? And I worried that maybe I'd be closing doors by walking into this, this opportunity. And I think that when my agent turned to me and said, okay, but are you going to be okay with someone who's not South Asian, someone who's white, a white dude doing the show? And of course, everyone should have the right to do any show. But this community, this culture, it's so core to me. It's so close to me. And I care so much. And I have so many ideas about the kind of music. I think part of my getting in that door was me deciding that, yes, I definitely want to be part of this conversation, and given the opportunity to see, what I can do and what I contribute to animation.
That's amazing. It's your show. Like, it feels like you're meant to do that show. And I think because of the opening up of the world that we're in, I feel like I think you're right that maybe there would have been a point when pigeonholing would happen, but I feel like it's more open now. I don't know. Do you feel like a shift has happened?
I think a shift is happening. I think it's going to be a process. I think we continually have to advocate for all of us recognizing our privilege, all of us recognizing our biases. We all have them, and continually championing others. This is why I think Amanda and I probably feel so strongly about being part of the Composers Diversity Collective, because it's reminding people that there's so many voices out there, and there is an authenticity that comes, for nothing else, just to add that layer of nuance and truth to the creation that we make.
100%. So to Ian and Drum and Lace, how, in terms of getting a foot in the door, well, tell me how what your sort of entry point into composing was, and then I have other questions after that.
Yeah. It's been kind of like a long road for me to get to where we are now. Both Sophie and I studied film scoring in college, so that we kind of started off in, 15 years ago or so, already thinking like eventually this might be something I want to do. For me, right when I graduated, I was in a band that kind of was taking off a bit, so I actually spent a lot of years on tour, not thinking about scoring for a while. It was a band called Passion Pit. And then around 2011, I think it was like our first kind of big break from being on the road for a couple of years. And I was kind of just sitting at home, and I was like, touring is fun, but I know I'm not going to want to do this forever. do you like what is 5 years from now? What is 10 years from now? And that's where I kind of started to try and figure out how I might want to do scoring. And I really fully just started at the bottom. I was doing a ton of short films. I was emailing people I went to high school with, I hadn't talked to in 5 years, being like, I think you live in LA. Like, if you know anything that anyone needs some music for something, I'll do it for free. Just like trying to get my feet wet. And I spent like a good 2-3 years just doing a lot of that. Also doing like commercial demos to kind of just get me writing as much as possible. And then around end of 2013, 2014, just by like kind of luck and coincidence, I met a director named Andrew Rossi, who was about to do a new documentary called Eiffel Tower. And literally it was like a friend of a friend introduced us, who's someone I didn't even know very well. And he hired me to do his documentary, which was my first kind of full-length doc. And around the same time, I met the wonderful actor, writer, David Dasmalchian, who he had been cast in one of the Passion Pit music videos. So we were on set, and I recognized him from being in The Dark Knight, because I'm a total comic book nerd. And we became friends and started talking. And he's like, yeah, I was like, I'm in the band, but like, I really want to try and work in film. And he's like, I have this feature script I've been trying to get made forever called Animals. And it was like another year or so before they actually started making that film, but that ended up being my first feature narrative. So from there on out, it was kind of, things started to move a little bit quicker, but it was still, everything that I was working on was kind of very low budget, not gigantic projects whatsoever. And it was just kind of trying to do as much as I could, learn as much as I could. I feel like this scoring world of how like it really works now is so different from what we were taught in school that I was kind of having to relearn everything in a way, like relearn new software, new methods, new techniques, teach myself how to mix properly, like all these things that I've kind of just fully enveloped myself in the past few years.
Okay, your baby is so ridiculously cute.
She's so happy right now. I don't know. And seeing all you guys, she's just like the happiest baby right now. Are you the happiest baby right now?
Aw.
Yeah. Uh-oh, this is how the screen dependency starts.
Yeah, we're pretty really.
How it starts. She's gonna start like touching the screen and try and like move things around. That is amazing. She is smiling like crazy.
Hopefully everyone that's watching can relate if anyone has children or pets or, But yeah, this is it. But I guess I'll go next because we don't know. It's a very volatile situation here. But as Ian said, like we met in school doing film scoring, and to be honest, it's something that I kind of fell into study wise. And when we graduated, I actually didn't want to do film scoring at all. So I wound up going to grad school for what had become my other passion, which was 3D audio and acoustics. So I wound up getting a master's in 3D audio in New York because at the time I wanted to work on sound installations, like still compose, but do more of like for media and for, immersive environments. And once that happened, like more opportunities to score kind of started happening. And the initial shift was that I was working kind of as an in-house composer, sound designer at a job out of grad school. And I felt like I had the tools to be able to do it on my own. So, and instead of focusing on like Ian did a very broad kind of like, I'll score anything, like that kind of approach. But for me, it was more like, to be honest, like being a woman in this industry, I was like, well, it's not as easy as just being like, hi, I want to score you a movie. Especially this was like 5 or 6 years ago. I was like, there really just weren't there weren't the Mika Levies and the Pinars and the Hilders yet. Like there just wasn't really like, it didn't look like there was an in yet. So I was like, what can I do that I know that I can do well to be able to like build a reel and go from there. So I started scoring things for fashion, whether it was fashion shows, fashion film, anything that was kind of in that realm. Because I was like, well, I like fashion. I can kind of, I at the time thought I could translate textures and colors into music, and that kind of then slowly segued into scoring a fashion documentary with Ian called The First Monday in May. And from there I was like, okay, like this is definitely something that I want to try to dive back into. And it's been slow, but it's been kind of like you know, it feels like it's been it plateaued a lot, but like if I really think about it, like it's just the steps are small, you know, like this is like a lifelong career. So
Yeah.
and I think we're just so used to seeing the music industry where things are so exponential, and you're like, oh my God, if I'm 30 years old and I haven't made it yet, like I'm not, you know, whereas the goal is to get to, you know, being in 60s, 70, you know, like work on this until, you know, for the rest of our lives. So, yeah, and I guess especially with this TV stuff was somebody at Apple TV just really taking a chance. Like I think a few people in the community put my name in, put Ian's name in, and we literally just had somebody at Apple reach out and be like, "Hey, we want Drum and Lace and Ian to score this," and it was just kind of one of those moments where you're like, "Wow, people do take chances," and like, you know, kind of like a pinch me moment because it was like, really, like they know who we are.
Yeah.
And then from that, then brought us to Good Girls on NBC, which was through a music supervisor friend who we've known forever, who was like, I think you guys would be great for this. So,
and that was already ongoing, right? That had already started. You started working on that show midway through, right?
season 3.
Yeah, they've been through a couple different composers in the past couple seasons, and you know, it's not a super score heavy show. I think they've always focused more on the syncs and cool songs that they put in, but they just, I feel like they hadn't found the right like musical match, and they were constantly searching, and thankfully Jonathan Leahy, the supervisor, gave us a call, and you know, we did season 3. It was really fun. We had to cut it short, obviously. They had to cut it 5 episodes short because of the lockdowns, but it got renewed for season 4, and hopefully we'll come back for that too.
Yeah.
Sorry, my son just had a little outburst. I feel like it's understandable in this context, though. Torrin, and what was your sort of like, you know, foot in the door moment that you realized this is what you were going to be doing?
Well, I mean, it's I think important to note that like everyone's path is so different. So for me, when I was a teenager, I loved film scoring, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I went to school at USC for film scoring, and while I was there, I tried to do as many student films as possible. And one fellow student was named Anish Chaganty, and he had just like this enthusiasm and like really good work ethic, and just loved movies. And I knew he was going places. And we did a couple student films and some commercials together, and then he did this movie called Searching that ended up at Sundance, and it got bought by Sony, and that seemed like a turning point for me, because you know, up until you get a project that is a little more recognizable, you feel like, you know, is this even worth it? Like, why am I spending so much time doing all this? Like, is this ever going to happen? And that was the first time I felt like, you know, this my passion for film scoring was a good idea to pursue.
Totally get it. So wait, I have to do a little bit of a lightning round around on what everybody's sort of like main instrument to compose on would be. So let's start with Amanda.
Yeah, so for me, it's guitar. I think like guitar and piano, but mostly guitar.
Nice. Amritha.
I'd love to say an exotic instrument, but it's piano.
It's the basics, right? Like that's where you get all the tonal movement. No, I get it. Ian and Sophia.
For me, it's kind of a toss-up between guitar, piano, or like a string patch, like a pad type thing.
Yeah, and I'd have to say piano just because of the ease, or my field recorder. Because I don't really ever start with things with voice, or a drum machine. But yeah, it's always a little bit different, but probably piano.
Right.
Nice. Yeah. I played piano growing up, so it's certainly piano is my most comfortable instrument.
Okay, can we do like a little favorite TV score? Like inspiring, like what's your favorite, you know, it doesn't have to be on now, or not, you know, be something that sort of made you notice scores in the first place, things like that. Start with Amanda.
I mean, it's not the first thing I noticed, but something recently, Labyrinth on Euphoria. I thought that was amazing. Really loved it.
Amrita?
6 Feet Under was probably the first time I kind of noticed score in a TV show. I thought it was just incredible and remarkable, really attentive, and I can still hear it in my head.
Amazing. Ian and Sophia?
Michael Giacchino scored a Lost was pretty epic for me when I was in college, like studying film score, and that's kind of what really perked my ears up to what TV scoring could be.
I really can't. I think I remember the Requiem for a Dream score being really powerful with Clint Mansell and the Kronos
That's not
Quartet.
a TV show.
Well, but yeah, I don't know. But recently, I love the score to Ozark. I think that Danny and Sandra do such an incredible job with setting the tone with that TV show.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just so much good TV. There's so much good TV scoring right now. It's kind of crazy.
I know, right? And Torrin?
I'll have to piggyback on Ian. I'd say The Lost Score by Giacchino is fantastic. And Sophia, you're right. There's so many shows right now. There's so many different voices. It's kind of crazy how things are going right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we only have a few minutes remaining. This is I'll throw this out to everybody. Now that you're sort of in the middle of, you're in the thick of these shows, what do you have any sort of like go-to career advice that you give to up-and-coming composers who want to do what you're doing, that you sort of say, well, I know it's hard to you all have such different paths. And, as you're talking, I'm like, is there a through line? There isn't really a through line. Like, I was thinking there might be a through line, but you all have totally different paths. So I don't know, has anything come to mind that you've noticed that seems like, try this?
Perseverance. As big as that may seem, just because we have a little bit of amount of time, but just perseverance and just like kind of like a healthy obsession with music and just being very intentional every day, just chipping away at your goals. I think that's really important. Even if it's for an hour a day or half hour a day or like a couple hours a day, just like, okay, my intention, my goals, I'm going to do something today that pushes me closer towards that ultimate
That's
goal.
great advice. That's amazing.
In terms of finding your voice, I think one of the things that helped me is just thinking about the artists who inspire me, like who do I resonate with, and really trusting the music that you're compelled to make, and just continuing to become better at your craft, because we always are learning to become better at our craft. But yeah, and perseverance, like you said, like and trusting. Our artistic careers, just like Sophia said, are long. We have plenty of time. We're going to get there. It is really resilience. It's just continuing to do what you do, and yeah. And we need your voices. We need all those cool voices out there.
100%. I mean, a lot of people do come to this from, not a lot of people, but it seems more and more come to this from an artist place, from having been an artist. A bunch of you, have done that. So I think not pigeonholing yourself, kind of not telling yourself stories about what you think you are or who you think you are, because you're right, careers are long. We have a lot, there's time to do all this stuff, and then people have children and things change, but you have to be home more. So I think being open to yourself is probably, that would be my best advice.